They think I don't hear them, but I do. The walls in this house, my house, are thinner than they think. Every whisper travels through them like cold air through a cracked window. I hear it all, even when they believe I'm asleep, even when they forget I'm still in the room. And last night, as I sat quietly in the hallway, my tea gone cold in my hands, I heard everything, laughter low and sharp. "She's fine. She just wants attention," my daughter said. Then her husband chuckled. At this point, "She's basically furniture." And then, like a dagger, my grandson's voice I once read bedtime stories to, mocking. "She does that thing where she acts confused and then everyone has to pause like she's the queen." So dramatic. They laughed, all three of them. Not a chuckle. A full relaxed laugh like cruelty was dinner table conversation now. I didn't make a sound, just sat there in my robe, spine straight, hands folded neatly. The steam from the tea had long stopped rising. My name is Edith. I'm 72 years old. This is the home my husband and I built after he retired from the fire department. Every beam, every rose bush, every nail holds memories. And now it's been invaded by my daughter Mara, her husband Scott, and their teenage son Dylan, who all moved in to help after my surgery last fall. But what began as help turned into something else entirely. At first, they were gentle. Mara made soup, Scott fixed the garage light, Dylan even walked the dog. Then things changed. Mara took over the kitchen. I wasn't allowed to lift pots anymore. Scott started handling the bills. He changed the Wi-Fi password and put the landline in his name. And Dylan, he stopped speaking to me unless it was to ask, "Can you not sit there? I need to plug in my charger." But I stayed quiet. I told myself they were stressed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that family sticks together even when things feel tight and strange. But last night, as I sat on the edge of the staircase in the dark, I realized something. They weren't helping me. They were erasing me. One missed mail, one ignored appointment, one little jab at a time. And it's strange the moment you realize you're no longer the heart of your home. You're just an object taking up space. This morning I walked into the kitchen and found my favorite mug in the sink, cracked, the one with my initials and my wedding date. No apology, no note. Mara was sipping coffee from one of the new mugs she bought, sleek and gray like everything else she's replaced. "Morning," she said casually. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," I replied. I didn't ask about the mug. She wouldn't care. Instead, I sat down at the far end of the table. She scrolled her phone. Scott came in moments later, yawning, scratching his head. "Hey, Edith," he said, like I was the neighbor. Not the woman who used to cook him Thanksgiving dinner before he ever married my daughter. Dylan didn't even look up from his cereal. I was surrounded by noise but utterly alone. They think I'm too fragile to know what's happening. They mistake my silence for weakness. They think I'm clinging to relevance by asking questions, by sharing stories, by needing help. They think I don't notice that the spare key I've always kept in the drawer is gone. They think I don't know that Scott changed the bank notifications from paper mail to his email. They think I don't remember the value of this house, how much equity sits beneath the floorboards they now scuff with muddy shoes. They think I'm an old woman with nothing left to give, but they've made one critical mistake. They forgot who this house belongs to, and they forgot I'm not deaf. I heard every word, and if they think this is just about attention, they're about to learn what it really looks like when I speak up. Not loudly, just finally. It didn't happen all at once. That's how they get away with it. You know, people like them. Family who turn you into a burden before you even realize what's happening. They don't kick down the door and scream, "We're taking over!" They chip away slowly until one day you wake up in your own home and feel like a guest who's overstayed. It started with my armchair. It's a simple chair, cream fabric, worn soft in the corners, right by the living room window where the afternoon light settles like honey. It was where I read, where I talked on the phone, where I watched the garden grow across the seasons. Then one day, Scott moved it. "Oh, it's better for the TV angle," he said, casually rolling it away to the dark corner near the hallway. In its place, he put some angular thing from a showroom, gray and lifeless, like a waiting room chair. No one ever sat in it, not even the dog. Next, it was the thermostat. Scott programmed it so I didn't have to fiddle with it. The house, once warm and familiar, now sat at a chill that gnawed at my fingers. I asked him once to raise it a bit, just a few degrees. He smiled and said, "We can't be wasting heat. It's not just your house now, Edith. Not just my house. That line stuck to me like gum on the bottom of a shoe. The kitchen was never mine again either. Mara replaced all the spice jars, the labels I'd handwritten years ago: nutmeg, turmeric, rosemary, gone. Now there were shiny uniform glass jars with digital printouts and barcodes like she was cataloging a museum instead of cooking meals. She reorganized the pantry, replaced the dishes. Even my kettle vanished. It was rusting, she said, as if that justified throwing away 30 years of morning rituals. She stopped asking me what I wanted to eat. Instead, she'd hand me a bowl and say, "Here's your low-sodium soup. We're doing pasta tonight." They were protecting me, they said. But I wasn't being protected. I was being erased, sanitized, pushed to the edges of my own life. One afternoon, I walked into the den to find Dylan stretched out on the couch playing video games, shouting into his headset. He barely looked up. "You should knock," he said. "In my own home." I walked to the bookshelf. My bookshelf where all my old photo albums used to be. They were gone. "Where did my albums go?" I asked. Dylan shrugged. "Mom boxed a bunch of stuff. Said we needed space for the printer and the Wi-Fi router." I found the albums 3 days later, stuffed in a plastic tub in the garage, lids off, dust settling on the plastic covers. In that moment, standing in the dark among garden tools and forgotten snow boots, I felt something I hadn't felt since I buried my husband: grief. Not the kind that comes from death, but the kind that comes from watching yourself fade while you're still breathing. They weren't malicious. Not in the cartoon villain way. They were casual, dismissive, which is worse. Scott accidentally signed up for digital banking only. Now I no longer received statements. Mara took over my medications to make it easier, but suddenly I was always running out early or being told I'd already taken one. Dylan mocked my routines, imitating my shuffle, calling me the ghost in the hallway. They all smiled at me in public, told neighbors how grateful they were to be living with me. It's so important for the kids to be close to their grandma. But in the quiet, in the spaces between meals and laundry cycles, they spoke of me like I was dead weight. "She's fine. She just wants attention." That line, that damned line. It was their refrain, their excuse for cruelty disguised as care. But I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for acknowledgement. A knock before entering my bedroom. A choice in the meals I ate. A say in what happened to my furniture, my memories, my mail. Not a lot, just dignity. But when dignity is denied again and again, it doesn't disappear. It sharpens like a knife left under pressure. And I was starting to feel it rise inside me. Slow, quiet, but dangerous. They thought I was docile, grateful, dependent. But they were wrong. I was just patient. And now I was awake. It happened on a Thursday, late afternoon. The kind of quiet where even the birds outside seemed to pause. I was upstairs folding a stack of towels when I heard Mara's voice downstairs, just loud enough to drift up the stairwell. "She does it on purpose, Scott," she said, her tone clipped. "That vacant stare, the sighs, it's all for show." A pause. Then Scott replied low and laughing. "You'd think she was auditioning for a sympathy award." I didn't move. I stood there, hands frozen over a towel with faint floral embroidery. One of the last pieces left from my linen closet before they replaced everything with hotel neutrals. Then came Dylan's voice. "She cries when she's alone. Saw her once in the hallway. I told Ava it was like a horror movie." They all laughed. Laughed like it was funny that I still felt things, that I still had a heart. They didn't know I was at the top of the stairs listening. They didn't know I could hear every cruel little chuckle. I didn't speak, didn't shout. I simply turned, walked back into my room, and closed the door softly behind me. And for the first time since they moved in, I locked it, not because I was scared, because I needed a barrier between me and their rot. I sat down at my vanity, the one Scott once offered to move into storage because you don't really wear makeup anymore, and stared into the mirror. My eyes didn't look vacant. They looked alive, like someone had lit a flame just behind them. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the small folder my husband had prepared for emergencies. It was labeled in his neat handwriting, "Property Deed." I opened it slowly. There it was, his signature and mine, still strong after all these years. The house was mine, sole owner, fully paid. No liens, no co-signers, no revisions. I had let them stomp around, change things, control things, but legally, they were squatters in my kingdom. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, the folder resting on my lap, and wrote a list in the margin of an old crossword book. It was a list of everything I'd forgotten was still mine: power, choice, the deed, the silence I could break. By sunrise, I'd circled one word: exit. Not mine, theirs. The next morning, I made eggs and toast for myself only. I used my old pan, the one Mara called ugly, and hummed a tune as I cooked. When Scott walked into the kitchen and raised an eyebrow, I just smiled and said, "Morning." He stared at me for a second too long. Mara followed, messy bun flopping, clearly irritated. "Didn't make coffee for everyone. I made it the way I like it," I replied. She blinked. Scott laughed nervously. "Well, someone woke up spicy." "No," I said, wiping the counter gently. "I just woke up and I meant it." Later that day, I went to the town records office with my folder tucked neatly into a tote bag. I asked to speak with someone about a sale, a very private sale. The man behind the desk blinked in surprise. "Selling the whole property, Mom?" "Yes," I said, placing the folder gently on his desk. "While it's still mine," he reviewed the documents. "Well, you're in full control, that's for sure. Do you already have a buyer in mind?" I smiled, lips thin. "I'll leave that part to the professionals." That evening, while Mara was complaining about a missed Amazon delivery and Dylan was glued to a screen again, I was upstairs making phone calls, setting meetings. Calling a locksmith, calling a realtor, calling back my life. They didn't know. They wouldn't know. Not until it was too late. Because this time, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't cry in the hallway. This time, I'd speak in paperwork, and I'd let the closing signature say the rest. The hardest part wasn't making the calls, it was pretending nothing had changed while everything inside me had. I still made dinner the next few nights, still nodded when Dylan barked at his video games. Still smiled faintly when Mara rolled her eyes behind my back because I asked where my favorite quilt had gone. I knew she'd tossed it. Smelled old. She once said they had no idea they were dining in a house I'd already set in motion to sell. On Tuesday morning, I scheduled the viewing. They were out. Mara at Pilates, Scott running errands in my car again, Dylan off to school with his eternal scowl. I had exactly 1 hour. I opened all the windows, let the autumn air swirl through the curtains. The house smelled like lavender and wood polish again like it used to. I put out cookies on the kitchen counter, lit a candle in the front room, opened every blind and door as if I were introducing the house to someone it hadn't met in years. Hope. When the realtor arrived with a couple in tow, mid-50s, polite, freshly retired, I greeted them at the door like a hostess, not a hostage. They loved the house, said the neighborhood was quiet, the backyard charming, the layout classic with potential. The woman touched my arm gently. "Are you sure you're ready to let it go?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "Some things are already gone, darling. This is just making it official. By the time the tour ended, they were already asking about next steps. Quick closing?" the man asked. I nodded. 2 weeks. That's all I need. My realtor smiled. "We'll make it happen." When Scott returned home that afternoon, he grunted a greeting and dumped a grocery bag on the counter. "Used your card?" he said casually. "You'll see the charges." I nodded. "Sure." Mara came home later annoyed about something. The yoga studio changed instructors again. "Can you believe that? I pay for peace and get incompetence." I was at the table clipping rose stems. "Oh, that reminds me," she said, pointing vaguely. "A man was at the door earlier. Some really thing. I told him we weren't interested." I smiled. "Oh, I know." She blinked. "You know, I invited him." Pause. "For what?" "Just a little tour. A preview?" "You could say." Scott wandered in halfway through the conversation, holding an energy drink. "What are you two squabbling about now?" Mara gave me a look. "Apparently, we're hosting showings now." Scott snorted. "What? Like an open house?" I met his eyes. "Something like that." They laughed. They laughed like I'd just announced I was joining a circus or becoming a TikTok star. "She's losing it," Mara muttered. "It's just attention." There it was again. That word, attention. Like I was a toddler throwing blocks or a pet barking at shadows. Not a woman with a deed in her drawer and a lawyer's business card in her pocket. I finished clipping the roses, placed them gently into a vase, and left them on the center of the table. "Dinner will be late tonight," I said calmly. "Why?" Scott groaned. "I have an appointment." Mara frowned. "With who?" "Just someone who understands contracts better than any of you." That night, I met with my lawyer in person. We finalized everything. I handed over all documents. The offer had already been accepted. The closing was scheduled. The deed would be transferred within 9 days, and in 10, the locks would change. I returned home to find them in the living room, arguing about where to hang some oversized, ugly canvas art Mara had just bought online. I walked past them quietly. No confrontation, no confession, just the slow, steady sound of keys in a purse and a signature already delivered. They thought they were still in charge, still occupying space with assumed ownership, but the foundation had shifted and they were standing on borrowed time. It was a quiet kind of storm. The night before, the house would no longer be mine, or rather no longer ours. Because while they slept soundly beneath my roof, dreaming of renovations and takeout orders, and their next petty insult, I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wide-eyed and calm, not afraid, not even angry anymore, just steady. I had done everything. The paperwork was in order, the buyers were ready, the funds were being wired, the closing would happen the next morning at 11 a.m. By noon, the house that held my marriage, my memories, and my humiliations would no longer hold them. They wouldn't even have time to scramble. Earlier that afternoon, I'd gone into the garage, the only place they didn't care to clean, and pulled out my husband's old red toolbox. In it were my spare keys, a small safe with our important documents, and a note he once wrote on the back of an oil receipt. If they ever forget whose house this is, remind them. I smiled when I read it, not with nostalgia, with fire. I moved with purpose that evening. I packed only what mattered: old photo albums, his watch, my letters, a few pieces of jewelry Mara once called too outdated to wear, a quilt my mother made. I filled 2 suitcases and 1 small lockbox. That's all I needed. The rest could go. Let them keep the new cutlery and the cold, lifeless furniture. Let them explain to the buyers why there's a dent in the hallway from Dylan's skateboard. Let them sort their mess in a place that no longer belonged to them. At around 10:30 p.m., I stood by the window in my bedroom, lights off, watching the wind move the trees gently across the lawn, the same lawn Scott once promised to maintain, and then forgot the very next week. From my perch, I could see Dylan's light still on, flickering against the blinds. Probably scrolling through his phone, calling me a ghost in some group chat. They were all asleep in the belly of a ship they didn't know was already sinking. I wrote 3 notes that night, one addressed to Mara and Scott, left on the kitchen table in an envelope marked for you, another left in Dylan's room. Just one line handwritten on a yellow sticky note. Your ghost is moving on. And the third? That one I kept with me, folded neatly in my coat pocket, pressed close to my heart. It was addressed to myself. I had written it weeks earlier, the day after the voicemail. It read, "You are not invisible. You were never the burden. You are the foundation. And now you are free." I slept just 2 hours that night, but when I woke up at dawn, I felt lighter than I had in years. No weight in my chest, no ache in my spine, just silence and power. I got dressed in a navy blue sweater, soft slacks, and my old pearl earrings, ones Mara once said looked too old school. Good, let them. By 9 a.m., I had my bags packed neatly in the foyer, the same foyer where Mara once hung that tacky sign, "In this house, we love loudly." Loudly, yes, but never lovingly. They were still asleep when I walked outside and closed the door behind me for the last time. I didn't slam it, didn't look back, just stepped into the waiting car and gave the driver the address to my lawyer's office. As we pulled away, I imagined them waking up to the note on the counter, the email notification about the property transfer, the new locks being installed by afternoon. I imagined the sound of them calling my name and realizing I was no longer upstairs. I was no longer beneath them. They called me 27 times between noon and sundown. I didn't answer a single one. By the time I stepped into my new temporary apartment, a quiet unit with a garden view and silence you could taste, my phone had gone from ringing to buzzing to silent. They were panicking. And they should have been, because while they were arguing in the living room over who moved the car keys or why the Wi-Fi wasn't working, the real blow landed in their email inbox. Subject: property title transfer confirmed. Scott must have opened it first. He was the one who started the credit monitoring after all. Mara followed, no doubt storming into the hallway shouting, "What is this?" And Dylan, poor boy, probably peeking over their shoulders with his mouth open. No words this time. Just confusion from someone who never thought consequences applied to him. The email from my lawyer was polite, professional, final. The house had been sold, title transferred, new owner effective as of 11:43 a.m. They had until 5 p.m. to vacate or speak directly with the new property manager whose contact was listed below. And for the first time in years, they couldn't hide behind my name. At 3:17 p.m., I got a voicemail from Mara. Her voice trembled with forced calm. "Mom." We saw the message. This has to be a mistake. You didn't tell us anything. We need to talk. Please call me back. I listened to it twice, then hit delete. At 4:02, Scott called. Left no message. At 4:11, another voicemail from Mara, this time frantic. There are people at the door, Mom. They say we have to leave. What the hell is going on? You can't just do this, can't I? Because I did. At 4:35 p.m., I finally picked up a call. I was sipping tea, watching the breeze flirt with the curtains. Hello? Her voice cracked like dry glass. Mom, what is happening? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I sold the house. You can't just— I did. She was silent for a beat. Then Scott took the phone. You're being unreasonable. I'm being decisive, I said. You're throwing your own family out onto the street. No, I corrected him. I'm throwing out 3 uninvited guests who mocked, controlled, and used me inside a home they never respected. Another silence. Then he barked. This is elder abuse. I laughed, not bitterly, but richly. Oh, Scott, that's rich coming from the man who changed my mail settings, hid my medicine, and used my credit card for his golf membership. He didn't speak after that, so I added, Tell Mara to stop crying. The new owner gave you 48 hours. Be grateful. That's more grace than you ever showed me. Later that evening, I received a photo from my realtor. Mara was standing on the porch, bags at her feet, red-faced and yelling into her phone. Scott was talking to someone in a suit, probably the property manager. Dylan was on the curb, arms folded, looking like someone had taken away his favorite toy. The porch light was off. The blinds were drawn. It wasn't their home anymore, not their haven, not their stomping ground, just another house on street that no longer belonged to them. And me? I sat by the window of my new place with a pen and a notebook, finally writing the poetry I'd abandoned years ago. Not revenge poems, freedom poems. Because this wasn't just about the house, it was about everything they stripped from me, inch by inch, word by word, and how I quietly and legally took it back. They had spent months laughing at me behind closed doors, calling me a ghost, a burden, a shadow of who I used to be. Now they would spend days explaining to landlords, friends, neighbors why they got kicked out of the house they never owned. Let that be the echo they hear in every empty hallway they move into next. It came just past 8 p.m. 3 sharp, determined knocks. I didn't flinch. I knew they'd find me eventually. I hadn't gone far, just far enough to breathe. I opened the door slowly, calmly. Mara stood there, shoulders stiff, eyes red-rimmed, but no tears left to cry. Her makeup had faded, her blouse wrinkled at the collar. Behind her, Scott loomed silent, arms crossed like a bodyguard who'd lost the job hours ago. Dylan wasn't with them. Maybe still sulking in the car, or maybe embarrassed. For the first time, they all looked small. Not loud, not smug, just small. Mara spoke first. You really did it. I stepped aside without speaking, gestured toward the 2 worn chairs in my modest living room. They didn't sit. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it, Scott said. I know, I replied softly. Mara's lips twitched. You blindsided us. No, I said, tilting my head. You just refused to see me. The silence stretched. Then Mara exploded. We moved in to help you. We gave up our space, our routine, our privacy for you, and this is how you repay us? I laughed quietly without bitterness. You moved in for control, Mara. You took over everything that had meaning to me and called it care. You threw away my routines, dismissed my voice, treated me like an inconvenience. Scott stepped forward, jaw tight. You made us homeless. I didn't blink. No, I made myself whole. I walked over to the small credenza and picked up the envelope I'd prepared earlier that day. Inside were copies of every expense they'd charged to my card since they moved in. Highlighted, itemized, categorized. I handed it to him. Take this, I said. Frame it. Study it. Next time you live off someone else, at least pretend to be grateful. Scott stared at it and opened it. Marla was shaking now. Whether from fury or fear, I couldn't tell. You humiliated us, she whispered. No, I said. I stopped allowing myself to be humiliated. There's a difference. She finally sat, arms crossed, eyes darting around the room, like she was looking for something familiar to cling to. Where are we supposed to go? She asked, voice smaller now. I looked at her for a long moment, and for a second, a cruel voice inside me wanted to say not my problem, but I didn't because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know you'll figure it out. You're resourceful, remember? That's what you always said when I asked why you didn't call or visit. Busy, Mom, just trying to survive. Scott put the envelope under his arm and pulled Mara up by the elbow. We're not going to beg. I smiled. You already did, just not with words. He stared at me. So, this is it? Yes, I said. This is the last time I opened the door for people who never planned to stay with love. They left without another word. No hug, no apology, no gratitude. Just the sound of shoes scuffing against the hallway and the elevator door swallowing them whole. I stood at the threshold for a while after that. Not because I was hoping they'd come back, but because I wanted to feel the peace they left behind. It wasn't silence I'd earned. It was space. It's been 4 days, 4 full days since I handed over the keys to the house. My husband and I built from dreams and savings and quiet Sunday mornings. 4 days since I walked out, not with anger or bitterness, but with everything I needed, my name, my voice, my self-respect. They haven't called again. Not since the knock. Not since I told them without shouting that I was done letting them live in a world where I didn't matter. And for once, they heard me. My new place isn't big, just a 1-bedroom with pale green curtains and a tiny patio that gets a sliver of morning sun. But every corner belongs to me. I hung up my husband's firehouse badge above the kitchen table. Set out the chipped teacup Mara once mocked. Baked blueberry muffins last night just for me. No one rolled their eyes. No one told me it smelled old. Just silence. The kind that hugs, not haunts. Yesterday I sat on the patio with my notebook. For the first time in over 20 years, I wrote something just for myself. Not a shopping list, not a reminder, not a family recipe no one cared to learn, but a poem. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd stay quiet with my eyes to the floor. Hands folded like apology, afraid to close a door. But I learned the house is nothing if it forgets your name. So I left before they buried me in drywall made of shame. This morning I saw a woman my age walking her dog in the neighborhood park. She looked tired, not in body, but in spirit. I recognized that slump in her shoulders, that pause before speaking. The kind of quiet that comes from too many years of shrinking yourself in rooms you once built. We nodded as we passed each other. No words, but the kind of look that says, I see you, and I hope. Wherever she went after that walk, she remembered what it feels like to take up space again. Mara and Scott are staying in a rented 2-bedroom on the outskirts of town now, I heard. No backyard, no garden, no thermostat to control, no family heirlooms to mock. Dylan dropped out of school for a week out of emotional stress. Mara told one of my old neighbors, claimed they were blindsided, claimed I'd had some sort of breakdown. Let them tell the story how they want. I'm not interested in correcting them anymore. They lost the right to define me the moment they turned my home into a cage and called it kindness. I didn't do this to punish. I did it to remind myself of the truth. I am not background noise. I am not excess weight. I am not the old woman upstairs. I am the foundation, the reason they ever had warmth to begin with. And when that warmth was taken for granted, I didn't scream or throw things or beg. I signed a few papers and let the walls they claimed collapse without me holding them up. Tonight I'm lighting a candle, not to mourn what was lost, but to bless what's begun. No more being the afterthought, no more being thanked with sighs and excuses. Just me, my name, my keys, my silence, and the freedom they never gave me.